Resting comfortably on a sturdy stand inside Tullahoma City Hall is a unique item to be found in a non-coastal and landlocked state. Here resides the brass bell, forged for the USS Tullahoma, one of 5 steam-powered gunboats built in the New York Naval Yard from 1862 to 1863 for use during the United States Civil War. The USS Tullahoma was a Secaucus-class 974-ton side-wheel gunboat commissioned by the federal government on November 28, 1862, for use against the Confederacy. The ship was double-ended, having a symmetrical wooden hull with pilot houses and rudders at both ends, and a shallow draft, making her ideal for combat on rivers. Her armament would include 2 100-pounder Parrott rifles, 4 9-inch Dahlgren smoothbore cannons, 2 24-pounder howitzer rifles, 1 12-pounder rifle, and 1 heavy 12-pounder smoothbore rifle. The Tullahoma would be 205 feet long, with a beam at 35 feet, an 11.5-foot draft when loaded, and a top speed of 14.5 knots, carrying a complement of 145 sailors and crew. While construction was ongoing, a brass bell was cast for her in 1863. Built alongside 4 sister ships of the same design, the Shamrock, the Mackinac, the Peoria, and the Algonquin, the Tullahoma awaited critical machinery and equipment to become seaworthy. However, wartime delays in manufacturing made completion of the vessel take longer than the war lasted. She was finally completed in 1867 and never saw the military action she was built for. The Tullahoma was laid up in ordinary for the next 18 months, out of service, but ready if needed. Her military designation came to a close on August 29, 1868, when she was stripped of her armaments and sold into merchant service. In November of that year, the USS Tullahoma was renamed the Mary M. Roberts and converted into a barge at the end of 1870. After that, her fate is only known to history. What remains, however, is her soul, the bell. So how did a ship's bell come to be in the city of Tullahoma?
I'm Dot Watson. I'm a native of Tullahoma for 89 years. 86 years. I'm here. I've been asked to tell you a little bit about the history of the Tullahoma Bell. Okay. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart because my husband and I were living in Norfolk, Virginia. He was in the Navy. He was a career Navy lawyer. And we were there living on base. And one night at dinner time, we heard a knock on the door, and one of our friends, one of his co-workers, was there. And my husband invited him in for dinner. He said, "Oh no, you've got to come with me. I have something I've got to show you. I've got to show it to you right now." And we had no idea what he was talking about. And so we went with him. He took us to the headquarters of the base there in Norfolk. And he said, "We've got to get out of the car so you can see it better." And he said, "Do you see that up there?" And my husband said, "Well, what I see is a ship's bell." And he said, "Yeah, that's what I want you to see. But we've got to go closer. You've got to see it up close and so you can read what's on it." So we walked up there, and on it was a ship's bell that was from a ship that had been commissioned to serve during the Civil War, but it was not finished before the Civil War was over. And then it's my understanding it was sold commercially and the bell was taken off and somehow became property of the U.S. Navy. And it was a bell. The ship's name had been the Tullahoma.
Ships' bells have accompanied navies and merchant fleets for centuries, serving both functional and ceremonial uses. Bells are typically mounted in a prominent position on an upper deck to signal crew and passengers, broadcast the time, announce whether an important personage or officer had boarded the vessel, or indicate the position of the ship in heavy fog. Often the ship's bell becomes the signifying artifact that tells the story of the vessel's adventures.
My name is Frank Wonder. I was an officer in the United States Navy for over 22 years. My retiring rank was the rank of commander. I retired in early 2006. Got to use the ship's bell, I think, when I was a midshipman, an officer in training, and so they still use them on Navy ships today, but there's a tradition that goes way back as to what the original purposes were for. So the way it worked in the Navy, when ships were made of wood and men were made of steel, they had a seaman whose job was with a half hourglass, like an hourglass, but it only lasted for 30 minutes. So he would turn that over, strike a bell to mark the time. So if he started at 4 in the morning, he would have just rang 8 bells at 4. He would strike 1 bell at 4:30, 2 for 5 o'clock, 3 for 5:30, all the way up until 8 for that next 4-hour block at 8 o'clock, and then it would start over again at 8:30. And so that's kind of how they told time. Well, the ships, when they're in port and underway, they give reports to the ship's captain, and one of them is they have the 8 o'clock report and the noon report, and they let the captain know what the status of all the systems are on the ship, and they request permission to strike the bells on time.
Bells for naval ships remain the permanent property of the U.S. government. When a vessel is decommissioned, the bell is one of several artifacts removed from the ship and tendered into the care of the Naval History and Heritage Command. The bell is cleaned, preserved, and cataloged. It may then wait in storage or find a new use on another vessel, most commonly with a namesake of the previous. Other bells are provided on loan to civic organizations, museums, military installations, or naval and historical institutions. Such is the case with the bell of the USS Tullahoma.
My brother, Bob Couch, was coming up a few weeks later. We were getting ready to move to Bahrain. That's where my husband would be assigned next. And we had my mother come up and visit us for several weeks. And he was coming to get her to take her home to Tullahoma. So we took him to see the bell. Well, he was very much an appreciator of Tullahoma history, and he wanted to find out more about it. So when he got home, he started doing some research about it and trying to find out about the ship that it had been on, and he got several groups involved in trying to acquire the bell for Tullahoma. He felt very strongly that it needed to be in Tullahoma.
Other uses of bells are for ceremonies, letting the crew know when the captain of the ship or other senior ranking officers are coming aboard. So the bell would be stationed at the quarterdeck, which is amidships, where they would put the gangway where the men and women now could come and go from the ship. And let's say the captain of the USS Tullahoma was coming aboard. They would ring it probably twice. He'd probably be a lieutenant commander or commander. Bong bong, Tullahoma arriving. So they give the name of the person, it's their command. They wouldn't say commanding officer USS Tullahoma or even USS. They would just say Tullahoma arriving. And when he departed, it would be Tullahoma departing, and there'd be 1 bell, meaning that he's gone off the ship.
And so it's just a wonderful legacy that we have the Tullahoma Bell here.
Bells are still used. And to have one like we do here, that's a great honor. To have a bell that's still intact, that the original bell from a ship back in the 1800s.
And our friend, who was so excited about us seeing it, had heard me talk about Tullahoma so much and the special place that it is, wanted us to make sure we saw it and all. And so we did, and we were excited to find it. The Tullahoma Bell.
I think it's wonderful that our city considers it something important like that. Even though Tullahoma doesn't, we're a landlocked city. We don't have a Navy base close to us, or an ocean, or even a river where riverboats might be. But for us to look at that and consider the importance of it, it helps us bring to mind the men and women that have served in the armed forces over the years. Even in Tullahoma was in an area where it was the Confederate states, but they were all Americans, you know. And I think we should never forget our country has a history of men and women fighting for our freedom. And when we have artifacts like this that show all the way back in the 1600s, we had, you know, men and women that are doing the same thing out there defending us today. I think it's a wonderful way for us to share that with the folks in our town, for children to learn about that. You know, when they do field trips here, it's very, very important, and I'm proud to just be a little piece of it to talk about Navy history.
And so it rests here in Tullahoma City Hall, silent now, but still carrying the weight of a nation divided, then reunited. From the Bell Foundry in 1863 to the Shore Patrol headquarters in Norfolk, and finally home to Tullahoma, this bell has traveled a long journey to find its rightful place. Though the USS Tullahoma never fired a shot in anger, her bell reminds us that service takes many forms, and that some vessels serve best as symbols of what we hope to become, rather than what we had to fight. The ship may have been sold, renamed, and lost to history, but her soul survives. And in that survival lies a peculiar American story, a city that was named Tullahoma, a ship built and never bloodied, and a bell that found its way home more than a century later. In this small Tennessee city, far from any ocean, the soul of a ship keeps watch, a bronze testament named Tullahoma to the unlikely connections that bind American history together. The bell no longer calls sailors to duty, but it does call us to remember.